A rich woman mocked a black waiter, daring him to play the piano as a joke, but when he touched the keys, the room fell silent, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night was full of glitter and glamour. It was one of those evenings where everything looked perfect on the surface. Expensive chandeliers hung from the high ceilings of the grand ballroom in Atlanta's most luxurious hotel. The room was filled with rich people dressed in their best clothes. Women wore long gowns and shining jewelry. Men wore tuxedos and carried glasses of champagne as they walked around, laughing and talking about money, art, and business. This event was a charity gala, but to many of the guests, it was more of a social show, a place to be seen, judged, and admired. Among all the important guests, there was one woman who always made her presence known: Evelyn Moreau. She was known for her wealth, her taste in rare art, and her sharp tongue. She had white blonde hair pulled neatly into a tight bun, a long diamond necklace around her neck, and a tone in her voice that always felt like she was looking down at everyone. She had no problem making jokes about others, especially those she considered beneath her. The hotel staff moved quietly between the guests, offering drinks and snacks. They were dressed in neat black and white uniforms and trained to smile politely, even if someone was rude. One of the waiters that evening was Marcus Hale, a tall black man in his early 30s. He was respectful, calm, and always professional. He walked with quiet grace, making sure to stay in the background. He carried a tray with wine glasses and offered drinks with a gentle "Good evening, ma'am," or "Sir, would you like something to drink?" Most people didn't even look him in the eye. To them, he was just part of the service. Evelyn noticed Marcus as he passed by her table. She didn't know his name, but something about him made her raise her eyebrows. She watched the way he moved, smooth and confident, without looking nervous or small. That annoyed her. In her mind, people like Marcus should know their place. She whispered to her friend beside her, "Look at that waiter, moving like he owns the place." Her friend laughed quietly, not sure what to say, but Evelyn wasn't finished. She looked over at the grand piano standing near the center of the ballroom, polished and shining. No one had played it yet that evening. An idea formed in her mind, the kind of idea people like her often have, not realizing how cruel it sounds. She smiled a little too widely, and as Marcus walked past, again she called out, "Excuse me?" Marcus turned, polite as ever. "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn tilted her head and pointed toward the piano.
"You look like you have elegant fingers," she said, half laughing.
"Why don't you play us something on the piano? See if the
"Waiter has some hidden talent." The words came out like a joke, but her tone was not kind. A few people nearby heard her and chuckled. Some looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. It was clear that she didn't expect anything serious. She thought he'd laugh awkwardly, shake his head, and walk away, maybe embarrassed. But Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't look away. He just stood there for a second, quietly, as if measuring something in his mind. The room wasn't silent, but it had definitely shifted. A few guests now looked at him with interest. Others just kept sipping their drinks, expecting to be entertained. Evelyn leaned back in her chair with a smirk. She thought she had done something clever. She had made herself the center of attention again, all with one little joke. Marcus gave a small smile. "Sure," he said simply. Evelyn blinked.
What?
"Wait, really?" "Yes, ma'am." Marcus turned and placed his tray gently on a nearby side table, making sure nothing would spill. His fellow waiters glanced at him, surprised. They knew Marcus was quiet and humble, never the type to draw attention to himself. But now he was walking slowly toward the piano, with every eye in the room following him. Evelyn's smirk turned into an amused grin. She crossed her legs and said to her friend, "This should be interesting." Marcus reached the piano and pulled out the bench. He sat down calmly, adjusted his posture, and looked down at the keys. His hands rested there for a moment. Do anyone watching, it may have looked like he was hesitating, but he wasn't. He was remembering. He hadn't played in front of people for a long time, not since his mother passed away, but the piano was still a part of him. It had always been a part of him. Now, in the middle of this grand ballroom, with rich strangers watching him like he was a circus act, he could feel something rising inside, Not nerves, but something deeper. A quiet power. He took a breath, and then he played the first note. It was soft, gentle, like the beginning of a story. Then came the next, and slowly the melody began to build. It was jazz, but not just jazz. There was a touch of gospel, a little soul, and a hint of classical. His fingers moved across the keys with ease, telling a story that words never could. The room began to change. The laughter died out. Conversation stopped. People turned their heads, surprised, confused, then completely pulled in. Even Evelyn, who had been ready to laugh at him, slowly sat up straighter in her seat. Her eyebrows lifted as the music continued. This wasn't a beginner's song. This wasn't someone tapping random keys for fun. This was real. This was art. People started whispering. Who is he? Did he really work here? Is this a setup? But Marcus wasn't thinking about any of them. Wasn't even thinking about Evelyn. In his mind, he was far away, back in his childhood home, where an old, upright piano stood near the window. His mother used to sit beside him and teach him songs, her voice soft and full of love. She always said, "Marcus, when you play, don't just hit the notes. Feel them. Tell the truth with your fingers."
Ow.
And now that's what he was doing, telling the truth. The song grew louder, richer, full of emotion. Oh. It danced and wept and rose into the air like it belonged there. People couldn't look away. Some had tears in their eyes, though they didn't understand why. It was just that kind of music, the kind that makes you remember things you didn't even know you'd forgotten. When the piece came to a close, Marcus played the last few. Notes slowly, softly, then silence. For a full 5 seconds, no one clapped. No one moved. They were frozen in that space, not wanting to break the magic. Then suddenly applause. Loud, thunderous, real applause. People stood up from their chairs.
Ow.
Others clapped with both hands above their heads. Marcus stood quietly, nodded once, and walked back toward the side of the room. Evelyn didn't say anything. Her mouth was slightly open. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have a comment ready. The joke had turned on her. And the man she tried to mock had just reminded everyone what real talent looked like. And that was only the beginning. As Marcus stood up from the piano and began walking back toward the side of the ballroom, the applause still echoed in the room. Many people were still staring at him, their hands slowly falling back to their sides, their eyes wide in disbelief. For a moment, it seemed like the entire world had changed. A few minutes ago, Marcus was just another waiter in a black and white uniform, moving quietly between tables. But now, he was something else, someone they hadn't expected, someone they couldn't ignore. The soft carpet under his shoes muffled his steps, but inside his heart was pounding. Not from fear, but from something deeper. A mix of relief and release. It had been so long since he had played like that in front of people. His fingers still felt the keys, the vibrations still alive in his hands. He had let go of something that had been locked inside him for years, and now it was out, for everyone to see. Evelyn watched him with her mouth half open, the wine glass in her hand forgotten. She had wanted to laugh. She had wanted to turn him into a joke, but instead, she had watched him take control of the entire room without saying a word. Her friends around her didn't dare make eye contact with her now. They were still stunned too, though some of them clapped politely, not really knowing what else to do. Marcus picked up his tray again, was carefully placing 2 empty glasses onto it. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't showing off. He simply nodded to a fellow staff member and continued working. That was something most people didn't understand. To Marcus, the music was not a performance. It was a part of who he was. He didn't need attention. He didn't need praise. He just needed to be real. But something had shifted. Even though he tried to blend back into the background, it was too late. People were whispering, pointing, asking questions. A man in a blue suit, a well-known local music teacher, approached him with wide eyes. "That was incredible," he said. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus just smiled politely and said, "I've played for a long time, sir. The man blinked. "You should be on a stage, not carrying drinks," Marcus nodded, but didn't say anything more. He wasn't trying to be rude. He just didn't want to explain his entire life story right there in the middle of a party. The truth was, Marcus had lived two very different lives. The life everyone saw, the one in the uniform, holding a tray, walking quietly and staying invisible, and the life they didn't know, filled with melodies, memories, and dreams that had been put on pause. He remembered being a small boy, sitting at an old upright piano in a cramped living room in New Orleans. His mother, Lorraine, was a jazz singer who had a voice like velvet. She used to sing at clubs, church events, and community centers. She wasn't famous, but everyone in the neighborhood knew she had soul. She would sit beside him and show him how to play chords, how to feel rhythm in his fingers. Sometimes she didn't even give him sheet music. Just said, "Listen, listen with your heart." By the time Marcus was 10, he could play songs just by hearing them once. By 13, he was performing at local school concerts. By 16, he had won a state piano competition. His dream was to attend a top music school, and he did, for a short time. He got a scholarship and moved to New York for college. Playing piano day and night, surrounded by other talented musicians, it felt like his future was finally beginning, but life doesn't always go according to plan. During his second year at school, his mother got sick, really sick. The doctors said she had cancer, and it was already spreading. Marcus dropped everything and came back home. He worked during the day and stayed with her at night, playing piano softly in the room when she couldn't sleep. It was the only thing. That brought her peace. She passed away 2 years later. After that, everything changed. Without her, Marcus felt lost. He didn't have the money to go back to school. He took jobs in hotels, restaurants, anywhere he could find steady work. He told himself it was just temporary, just until things got better. But time passed, and the music stayed hidden. He still played in his apartment sometimes, but never in public. Part of him believed the world didn't care about stories like his. But now, standing in this grand ballroom filled with rich strangers, he had just reminded himself that he was still capable of more. He had made them listen. Not because of his clothes, not because of who he knew, because of the truth in his hands. A woman from a local newspaper walked up to him next. She introduced herself kindly and asked if she could write about what had just happened. "People need to hear this," she said. Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. It wasn't really anything planned. That's why it's so special." She replied. He agreed, but only if she didn't make it a dramatic story. "No fairy tales," he said. "Just tell the truth." She nodded. The truth is more powerful anyway. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat silently at her table. Her friends were talking now, excitedly, nervously. One of them said, "Did you know he could play like that?" Another whispered, "It gave me chills. I think I almost cried." Evelyn didn't speak. For the first time that evening, she didn't know what to say. A strange feeling had crept into her chest. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper, maybe even guilt. She hadn't just made a joke. She had tried to humiliate someone she thought was beneath her. And he had answered her not with anger, not with words, but with beauty. She got up slowly and walked toward the back of the room, looking for Marcus. She found him near the staff area, helping to clear some glasses. "Excuse me," she said. Quietly, Marcus turned. His face was calm, but unreadable. "I just wanted to say..." Evelyn paused. The words didn't come easily. That was unexpected. Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly, but said nothing. "I didn't mean to offend you earlier," she continued, her voice low. "It was. I suppose I was trying to be funny." Marcus nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She swallowed hard. "We're amazing." "Thank you," he said, his tone polite but distant. Evelyn nodded and turned to leave. She didn't know what else to say. Maybe there was nothing else to say. She had learned something important that night, though she wouldn't fully understand it until later, that real greatness doesn't need to shout, just needs one moment to be seen. Back inside the ballroom, someone had taken out their phone and recorded part of Marcus's performance. They posted it online with a simple caption, "The waiter who played like a legend." By morning, that video would be everywhere, but Marcus didn't know that yet. He was still working, still clearing tables, still staying humble, because, For him, the music was never about fame. It was about truth, heart, and a promise to a mother who once said, "Let your fingers speak when the world won't listen." That night, the world had listened. It was only the beginning. When Marcus sat at the piano that night, the world around him had already started to fade. It's the clinking of glasses, the laughter of rich guests, it's the echo of heels on the ballroom floor. All of it became silent inside his head. The only thing he could hear clearly was the sound of the piano calling him. His fingers were still, resting lightly on the keys. But inside his mind, he had already gone far away, back to a small home in New Orleans, where the real story of his music had begun. Marcus was only 5 years old the first time he touched a piano. It was an old upright piano with scratches on the wood and a couple of sticky keys. It stood next to a window that looked out at the street. Sometimes the sound of car horns or kids playing outside would mix with the music coming from the house. That piano belonged to his mother, Lorraine. She had bought it secondhand from a church that was closing down. She didn't have much money, but she always said, "A home without music is just a place with walls." Lorraine was a jazz singer. Her voice was smooth, strong, and full of soul. She didn't sing for fame. She sang because she couldn't help it. She sang while cooking, while cleaning, while putting Marcus to sleep. Her songs were old gospel hymns, blues melodies, and sometimes made-up lullabies that only the two of them knew. On Sundays, she would take Marcus with her to the church down the road, where she sang in the choir. After the service, she would let Marcus sit at the church piano and play whatever came into his head at first. His tiny fingers struggled to reach the keys. But even then, there was something special about how he played. He didn't bang on the keys like other kids. He pressed them gently, as if he could hear a song inside the piano and was just trying to let it out. By the time Marcus turned 7, his mother started giving him lessons at home. She never taught him from a book, "Feel the song, baby." She would say, "Don't just play the notes. Tell a story." She would close her eyes and hum as he played, stopping him now and then with "too stiff." Try again, out with feeling. Sometimes they stayed up late into the night, just playing music together, laughing, and experimenting with new sounds. Those were the happiest moments of Marcus's life. As he grew older, his talent became impossible to ignore. By the age of 10, he could play full jazz pieces by ear. By 12, he was winning music competitions at his school and performing at small community events. People in the neighborhood started calling him Little Ray, after Ray Charles, even though Marcus could see perfectly. They meant it as a compliment, a sign of respect for how he made the piano come alive. But life was not always easy. Lorraine worked long hours at a diner during the day and sang at bars or community centers at night. Money was tight, and their neighborhood wasn't always safe. Still, she always made sure Marcus had time to play. She would often say, "The world's heavy, baby. Music is how we stay light." In high school, Marcus's reputation as a pianist kept growing. His teachers pushed him to apply for music scholarships. He eventually got one from a top music school in New York. Leaving home wasn't easy, but his mother was so proud. She packed his bag, kissed him on the forehead, and said, "Don't forget who you are, Marcus. Don't forget who gave you your first song." New York was a new world. For the first time, Marcus was surrounded by other talented musicians from around the country. Some were rich, some were famous online, and many had studied under professional teachers for years. At first, Marcus felt like he didn't belong, but when he played, even the most experienced students stopped to listen. His music didn't sound like everyone else's. It was raw, emotional, and full of life. Teachers praised him. Students admired him. He felt like maybe, just maybe, his dreams were starting to come true. But then came the phone call that changed everything. His mother had been feeling tired for weeks, but she thought it was just stress. One day, she collapsed at work. The doctors found cancer in her lungs and said it was already spreading. The news hit Marcus like a storm. He flew home immediately and stayed by her side. For a few weeks, he thought maybe she could fight it. But the truth came fast and cold. She didn't have much time left. Marcus dropped out of school without telling many people. He took a job as a hotel bellboy during the day and cared for his mother at night. The music school sent him letters, asking if he planned to return, but he ignored them. How could he think about scales and lessons When the woman who gave him music was fading away before his eyes, those months were the hardest of his life. Watching his mother grow weaker each day broke something inside him. Still he kept playing. Not in front of crowds, but for her. Soft lullabies to help her sleep. Hymns to ease her pain. Sometimes just quiet, wordless melodies that only they understood. One night, as he played for her, she whispered, "Promise me, baby. Promise me you'll never bury your music." "It's too beautiful to stay in the dark." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I promise." She smiled, and that was the last thing she ever said to him. After her funeral, Marcus felt empty. The piano was still there, but it hurt too much to play. He started working full-time at the hotel. The job was stable, the pay was just enough, and most of the guests didn't even notice him. Years passed, he moved from bellboy to waiter. Still played sometimes late at night when no one could hear, but never in public. Part of him believed that his time had passed. The dreams were for other people now. But the truth was, the music had never left him. It lived inside his hands, inside his memories, inside every heartbeat. And that night in the ballroom, when Evelyn made her joke and pointed to the piano, something woke up inside him, something fierce and quiet and unstoppable as he played. That night, he wasn't just performing for the guests in the room. He was playing for the dusty piano by the window, for the church hymns and jazz nights, for the sticky keys and the laughter of his mother, for the lullabies sung in dim light, the promise he made with tears in his eyes. Every note was filled with memory. Every chord was a story. The music swelled, not to impress, but to speak. The truth. People heard beauty in his playing, but what they didn't hear, what only Marcus could feel, was the pain behind it, the love behind it, the history. When he played a slow blues section, he remembered holding his mother's hand. In the hospital, when he played a bright, quick jazz riff, he remembered her spinning in their tiny kitchen while dinner cooked. When he slowed down again into a soft gospel line, he remembered her voice in church, singing like she was trying to reach heaven. To everyone else, it was a breathtaking surprise. But for Marcus, it was a return to who he truly was. The guests saw a talented man who had been hiding in plain sight. But Marcus wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply opening the door that had been shut for too long. As the song reached its final notes, Marcus's hands slowed. His eyes closed. The room was quiet, completely still. Then came the final chord. Long, deep, and full of peace. He lifted his hands from the keys and let the silence fall. It was done. Not just the song, but the silence inside him. He had finally honored the promise he made to never bury his music. And in that moment, everything changed. For a few seconds, after Marcus finished playing, the ballroom stood frozen. It was as if time had stopped. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. It was not the kind of silence that comes from discomfort. It was the kind that happens only after something truly powerful has been witnessed. Then slowly it started. A single pair of hands began to clap, then another, and another. In moments, the entire room erupted into thunderous applause. People were standing up from their chairs, clapping with wide eyes and open mouths. Some even shouting praise they couldn't hold back. The rich and powerful, who a few minutes ago were ignoring Marcus as just another face in a waiter's uniform, were now cheering for him as though he were a star on stage. Glasses of champagne were forgotten on white tablecloths. Conversations had completely stopped. The energy in the room had changed completely from snobbish and shallow to full of shock, admiration, and curiosity. Marcus stood up from the piano bench slowly, didn't bow or raise his hands. He simply gave a small nod, calm and humble, then turned and began walking back toward the edge of the room. The applause followed him. A few people even reached out to shake his hand, but he gently stepped aside and went back to doing what he had come to do, serve. But there was no going back. Something had shifted. He could feel it. The eyes that once looked past him were now glued to him. Every step he took, every move he made, was being watched not with judgment anymore, but with respect. And that felt strange, unfamiliar, a little uncomfortable. Marcus had spent years blending into the background, working quietly and letting the world pass by. Now, For the first time in a very long time, he had been seen. A well-dressed man in a navy blue suit approached him near the back of the ballroom. He had a small gray beard and kind eyes. "Excuse me," the man said, "but that performance. I've been in music for 30 years, and I've never seen someone play with so much soul." Marcus nodded politely. "Thank you, sir."
Oh.
"What's your name, Marcus Hale?" The man smiled. "I'm David Legrand, a music producer." Marcus didn't respond right away. He didn't want to jump to conclusions. He had heard stories of empty compliments and fake promises. But David seemed genuine. "You're not just talented," David said. "You're gifted. Have you recorded anything? Have you ever performed publicly?" "Not in a long time." Marcus replied, "Well, that needs to change." Marcus offered a small smile. "We'll see, sir." At the same time, another guest had recorded part of Marcus's performance on her phone. Her name was Sophie Blake, a young journalist who had been attending the gala to write about the event for a local online magazine. She had only come for the food and the photos, not expecting anything meaningful. But when she heard Marcus play, her heart had stopped. Now, as she sat at her table, she uploaded the video to her social media page with a short caption. "The waiter just played the piano and left everyone speechless." She didn't know it yet. But that single post would go viral within hours. People began to whisper again. But now the whispers were filled with excitement. Guests were asking each other, "Who is he? Where did he learn to play like that? Why is he just a waiter?" It was like the room was trying to catch up with the truth they had just discovered. Marcus wasn't ordinary. Never had been back at her table. Evelyn Moreau sat in silence. She hadn't clapped at first. Her hands were frozen, her mind racing. Her eyes followed Marcus as he moved through the room like nothing had happened. She felt something strange building in her chest. It was a mix of shame, surprise, and a kind of respect she wasn't used to giving. She had made the joke, treated him like a toy, a moment of cheap entertainment. But instead of embarrassing himself, Marcus had opened the hearts of everyone in the room. And now she was the one who looked foolish. Her friends didn't say much. One of them finally broke the silence, whispering he was amazing. Evelyn gave a slow nod. Yes, he was. A few minutes later, she stood up and quietly made her way toward Marcus. She wasn't used to apologizing to anyone, especially not someone she had once looked down on. But something about that moment demanded it. She found him near the staff area, setting down his tray. "Excuse me?" she said softly. Marcus turned, recognizing her instantly.
Oh.
He didn't look angry. He didn't even look cold. He looked calm, collected. "I wanted to say, I was wrong," Evelyn said, her voice quieter than usual. "That joke I made, it wasn't fair. It was cruel, and I'm sorry." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then simply said, "Thank you." He didn't smile, didn't extend the moment longer than it needed to be, gave her peace, but not permission to feel proud of herself. She had to sit with what she had done, and she knew it. Later that night, the manager of the hotel approached Marcus. "We've had musicians play here before," he said, "but nothing like what you just did." "I didn't even know you played," Marcus just shrugged. "It's been a while." The manager smiled. "Well, if you ever want to play again, the piano's always here." That same night, Marcus walked home more slowly than usual. The cool air felt different against his skin. The city lights seemed softer, the street noise gentler. He kept thinking about everything that had happened, the music, the applause, the conversations afterward. It felt like something deep inside him had opened up again. A door he thought was shut forever. When he reached his small apartment, he went straight to the old digital keyboard that sat in the corner. It was dusty. The stool next to it covered in an old jacket. He hadn't touched it in weeks, maybe months. He sat down and began to play. Not for a crowd this time. Not for applause. Just for himself. The notes flowed easily, as if they had been waiting patiently inside him, and now they were free. The song was soft, thoughtful, and full of peace. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing again and again. At first he ignored it, but it didn't stop. When he finally picked it up, he saw dozens of messages, missed calls, and notifications. Friends, coworkers, even old classmates had sent him messages like, "Is this you? And you're blowing up online?" Confused, he clicked on a link someone had sent him. It was the video from the night before, the same clip that Sophie Blake had posted. In less than 12 hours, it had gotten over 200,000 views. Comments were pouring in. "This man's music touched my soul. Why is he not a world-famous pianist already? This is what true talent looks like." Marcus couldn't believe it. He scrolled through hundreds of comments, people from all over the country, some even from other countries, sharing the video and praising his playing. The story of the waiter who stunned a ballroom had started to travel across the internet. That afternoon, Sophie reached out to him personally. "I'd like to do a full story on you," she said. "Not just the video. I want to tell people who you really are." Marcus hesitated. He wasn't used to attention. But something inside him whispered that maybe this was the time. World was finally ready to listen, so he agreed. That week, Sophie published an article titled, "The Hidden Genius Behind the Tray: How One Man's Music Silenced a Room." It went viral too. With that came invitations, music venues, radio stations, even morning TV shows. Everyone wanted to meet Marcus Hale, the waiter who played the piano like a master. But Marcus stayed grounded. He still went to work. He still cleaned up after guests. But in the quiet moments, he practiced, played. He remembered the promise he had made to his mother to never bury his music. And now, he wasn't just remembering. He was living it. Moment that began as a cruel joke had turned into a door one that led back to the dream Marcus thought he had lost. And behind that door was a future he never expected, but one that was finally his. After the night of the gala, Marcus Hale's life began to change slowly but surely. He didn't expect anything big to happen. Didn't play the piano that night to prove something. He didn't want fame, applause, or attention. He'd only responded to a moment with the truth that lived in his heart. But sometimes, even a quiet truth can start something powerful. The next morning, when Marcus went to work at the hotel, things already felt different. People looked at him with new eyes. The same coworkers who used to just nod politely now came up to him with wide smiles and warm words. "You were amazing, man," said Jared, one of the servers. "I didn't know you could even play." Another staff member, Rosa, touched her chest and said, "You made me cry, Marcus. That music, it was like something from heaven." Even the hotel manager, who was always strict and formal, gave him a firm handshake. "That was one of the finest things I've ever seen in this hotel," he said. "Thank you." Marcus thanked them all quietly. He was kind, but still kept to himself. Fame didn't sit well with him, wasn't used to being the center of attention, and he didn't want people to treat him differently. He wanted to do his job, live his life, keep playing music like he always had in peace. But the world outside the hotel had other plans. The video that had been posted online from the gala continued to spread. Within 48 hours, it had been shared on dozens of news websites, social media pages, and even picked up by local TV stations. Reporters started calling the hotel, asking to speak with Marcus. Some even waited outside to try and catch him between shifts. At first, Marcus avoided them. He didn't know how to handle reporters. He wasn't someone who liked cameras or microphones. But one evening, after work, he sat at his small kitchen table and thought about what his mother would say. "Don't run from the light, baby," she would have told him. "Let the world see what God put in your hands." So the next morning, when Sophie Blake, the journalist who first shared his video, called and asked for an interview, Marcus said yes. They met in a quiet coffee shop. Sophie didn't bring a big camera or a loud team, just a notebook and a kind smile. "Tell me about your story," she said gently. "Not the one from the video, the one no one's heard yet." He did. He told her about the old piano in New Orleans, about his mother's voice, about the scholarship and the heartbreak. He spoke of sacrifice and silence, of how music never left him, even when life got dark. Sophie listened carefully, writing down every detail. She didn't rush him or try to twist his words. She just let him speak. When the article was published, it was titled, "The Song He Never Stopped Playing." It touched thousands of people. Readers wrote in with comments like, "This story made me cry at work. I showed this to my son. He wants to learn piano now. I felt like Marcus was telling my story too. Thank you." And then came the emails and messages from all over. A music school offered him a full scholarship to return and finish his degree. A local jazz club asked him to perform on Saturday nights. A famous music producer sent him a message saying, "Let's make an album together." Even though all this attention felt overwhelming, Marcus took his time. He didn't want to make quick choices. He knew the world moved fast, but he also knew that real music, the kind that lasts, takes patience. He sat with each offer, thought about it, prayed, and remembered his promise. Eventually, he said yes to the jazz club. His first official performance was at a small venue downtown, filled with people who had seen the video or read the article. The lights were low, the air full of excitement. When Marcus walked onto the stage wearing a simple black suit and no fancy accessories, the crowd stood up and cheered before he even touched the piano, but Marcus didn't smile wide or wave, sat down calmly, just like he always did. A breath placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. This time the song was a new one he had written just a week before. It was soft, filled with love and memory. He called it Loren's Song, after his mother. People cried. Couples held hands. Strangers closed their eyes and let the music wash over them. When the song ended, the room was silent again for a moment. Then came the applause, stronger than anything Marcus had heard before. He played 3 more songs that night. Some were his, some were old jazz classics. But every single one was played from the heart. Afterward, people lined up to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him how much it meant to them. Some even brought their children to meet him. "You inspire me," one teenager said, eyes shining. "I want to be like you." Marcus smiled and said gently, "Be better than me." Over the next few weeks, Marcus played more shows. Not huge concerts, just small ones, places where people could really listen. He started writing more music too, staying up late into the night with a pencil and a notebook, letting the sounds inside him come out onto the page. Eventually, he accepted the offer from the music producer to record an album. They worked in a studio downtown, a quiet place with warm lighting and wooden floors. Marcus brought his songs, and the producer brought the tools to share them with the world. They didn't use auto-tune or fancy tricks, just Marcus and a piano. That's all it needed. When the album released, it was titled Promise Kept. It featured songs like Late Night Blues, Window Light, and of course Loren's Song. The reviews were glowing. "A rare soul in a noisy world," one critic wrote. "His music speaks without words. This is what real art sounds like." But even as his name started appearing in music magazines and radio shows, Marcus remained. Grounded, he didn't move to a big city, didn't buy a fancy car. He still lived in a small apartment, still shopped at the same grocery store, still smiled politely to neighbors. He also stayed in touch with the hotel. In fact, he didn't quit right away. For a few months, he still worked 2 shifts a week. When people asked why, he just said, "I'm not done here yet." He wanted to train a new team, help hire more staff, and make sure no one was left behind when he moved on. That was Marcus always thinking of others. Eventually, he did leave the job. But he left on good terms, with hugs from coworkers and tears from the manager. They threw him a small goodbye party in the staff room, with cake and photos from the gala night on the wall. "You reminded us what heart looks like," Rosa said, hugging him tightly. Marcus smiled and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." After that, his life moved forward, but his soul stayed the same. He started a music program for kids from underprivileged neighborhoods. He visited schools, talked about his journey, played songs, and told children, "Your dream doesn't have to be big, to be real, just don't let anyone take it from you." The world began to recognize him not just as a talented pianist, but as a kind man with a powerful story. His mother's face stayed in his heart every day, and sometimes, before a performance, he would close his eyes and whisper, "This one's for you, Ma." As the years passed, Marcus Hale became a name known to many, not for fame, not for fashion, but for heart, for truth. For the moment he sat at a piano in a ballroom full of strangers and reminded them all that talent has no color, no uniform and no limit. And all of it had started with a joke. A joke from someone who thought he was nothing. A moment meant to embarrass him. But Marcus didn't respond with anger. He responded with beauty, with grace, with music. And in doing so, he didn't just change his own life. He touched the lives of millions. He reminded the world that greatness often hides in quiet places, waiting for one moment, one song, one chance to finally be heard. And when it is heard, it cannot be forgotten.